Please state your name and relation to me, please.
My name is Tressa Pruitt, and I'm your mom. And I'm happy to be helping with this project today. It was very interesting learning a bunch of information about our family. I did take a few notes when I was talking to different members, so I hope you don't mind if I refer to my notes here and there so I don't forget anything.
Okay, so where did our family come from? Let's just start with your side of the family.
My side of the family settled in the East, specifically in Pennsylvania and South Carolina. I specifically grew up in Maryland, and I lived there all my life until I graduated college. I was the first one to graduate college. Once I graduated, I moved down to North Carolina, got engaged to Hope's dad, and Dad Randy, and I met him when we were in Maryland. He was actually serving in the Marine Corps at the time.
All right, do you know anything about my dad's side of the family?
Dad's side settled in the West, mostly Texas. In fact, pretty much all of his relatives are still living in small towns in Texas right now. He specifically, as you know, is from Hawkins, Texas, which is a really tiny town. It has one stoplight, and I think it had 1,310 people the last time I visited.
Mm-hmm. So where can both of our bloodlines be traced back to? Do you know?
Between the two families, our bloodlines can be traced back to various European countries. We have English, we have Spanish, German, Dutch, Irish, as well as Cherokee Indian.
All right, and how did you come across this information?
I thought the best place to start finding out about our lineage would be to talk to the oldest living relatives that we have. On my side of the family, that would be my grandmother Edith, who we refer to as Meemaw, and on Dad's side of the family is his mom Pat, who you refer to as Granny. So Meemaw and Granny helped us out with this project, and they're both in their mid-80s, so they were able to fill in a lot of the gaps of the older generations.
Okay, and for our name specifically, do you know where our name originates from?
So actually it's very interesting. This summer when we visited Europe, we were able to do some research on the name Pruitt. And when we were in Scotland at the Highland Games, you and I actually researched the lineage of Pruitt, and were able to find out that it originated in Wales, England.
How many generations can you trace back from your parents?
So we were able to trace back 3 generations from you, from when you were born, and that would be 2 generations from me and your dad back. That would be back to the 1800s when our great-grandparents were born.
Okay, can you recall any names, places of birth, or birthdays, any extra information that you've learned?
Yeah, we got a lot of information regarding the different generations, so if you don't mind, I'm going to refer to my paper here because I have a lot of little notes about it, and I want to make sure I get everything correct. So on my side of the family, my great-grandparents were Anna and Charles Sterling. I'm not exactly sure where they were born, but they were born in the late 1800s, and they resided in West Virginia. And my great-grandfather Charles worked in the coal mines, and they had my grandmother Edith in 1932. That's your Meemaw. She met my Peepaw, that was my grandfather. His name was Phil, and they got married. And Peepaw's stepfather's family was from Germany. And a few years later, they actually had 4 children, one of them being my mom, that's your Grammy. And she was born in 1956 in an army base in Alabama. And she met my father, Clarence, and had me when she was 17. They got married and had me when she was 17, and I was born in 1973 in Cheverly, Maryland.
Okay. Do you know anything about Dad's family?
I do actually. So, your dad's grandparents' names were Lucy and Virgie Carter. They were born in Arkansas and Texas in the early 1900s, and then they resided in Texas. Luther worked in a feed mill, and a really terrible story that we actually found out was that one day there was a really terrible fire, and he got burned on his shoulder and his back. He survived the fire, but that was just a terrible incident that we were able to find out. They had your granny, her name Patsy Laverne, you know her as Granny, but or Pat, people call her, but Patsy Laverne. And she was born in 1935 in Floydada, Texas. And many years later, she met your pawpaw, that's your dad's dad. And they got married and had your dad, Randy, in 1971 in Gilmer, Texas.
Do we have any veterans in the family?
Yes, we have veterans on both sides of our family. On my side of the family, my grandfather, Phil, who we call Peepaw, he was a paratrooper in the Army. And kind of a little fun fact was actually we had 3 generations of paratroopers in the Army, including my Uncle Ricky. And that was the first time that ever happened. So the Army threw a big celebration for that fact. And so that was kind of a cool little thing that we found out. And then on your dad's side, your grandfather, Pawpaw, he was also in the Army, and he served in World War II. And as far as your dad and your uncle, they both served in the Marine Corps. And that's actually where I met your dad. He did a 4-year tour in the Marine Corps, and he was stationed up in D.C., 8th and I, which is where the Commandant post is, and I met him when he was in the Marine Corps, and I was in college, and I was in a sorority, and we met, and that's how we actually got engaged years later and moved to North Carolina to start our life.
All right, next, what about any stories from our family? Anything that stands out?
Yeah, so there's actually a really hilarious story from my side of the family. So my grandfather's stepfather is the one who raised him, and his name was Joseph, and his family name was actually German in origin, and it's Rabseman. And when they translated it into English, it actually meant turnip seed, which you can imagine we did not want to have that as our English name. So years later, they changed the name to Turner, and that's what you can find through our lineage. That's your granny's maiden name, that's Meemaw's married name, and so on and so forth. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Anything else?
We also found out a very interesting and historical story regarding your dad's side. It seems that his great-grandmother, actually not his great, just his grandmother, Pearl Foster, actually traveled across the United States in a covered wagon, fleeing from Indians in order to settle land way back when. And she was able to settle land in Texas, and she was able to get 9,600 acres, to which she divided between her 4 children. And that land has been transferred down through generations, and there's actually a portion of the land known as Pruittville in Hawkins. So that's pretty interesting, and many of the family members live along that stretch of land. So I always thought that was very fun and interesting.
All right, for the next question, do we have any genealogical records?
I don't know of any official genealogical records. I do know that my mom, your Grammy, did start researching our heritage on Ancestry.com, but I'm not exactly sure how far she got with that. I definitely would be interested continuing that investigation to see what information we could figure out about our family. I actually think it's really cool that they have tools now that can help you know where you came from, and very important facts that happened many years ago that we wouldn't normally be able to determine. So this project actually has me interested in figuring out even more information about who we are and where we came from.
Thank you.
You're welcome.